Good evening and welcome. Welcome, 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 welcome. Yes, people, good evening and welcome to the Jamaica Mix. This is the 2025 general election episode. Let me just put the thing together because we know that come on the 3rd, which is next week, Wednesday, Jamaicans go to the polls to elect a new administration for the next 5 years. And of course, the primary contenders in this election contest is the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party, both of whom are fielding 63 candidates each for these general elections. Of course, it's a first past the post type of a contest, which means that the political party that gains the majority of the seats forms the government. Of course, there are some 189 different candidates that have been nominated, and that nomination took place some 2 Mondays ago for these contests. And there are some hot button issues. The PNP, who is in opposition and has been for the better part of the last for the last 9 going now into 10 years, have had to do a fair amount of rebuilding to sort of get themselves into the kind of position that would make them competitive in these elections. We are all aware, if you're paying attention, to the kind of the fracturing that the PNP suffered, not only leading into the 2020 election, but it basically started prior to that. And of course, the party got a shellacking in those contests, losing more than 21 of the seats that they held, reducing them to a majority of 13 or 14 seats in the parliament. At the same time, there is backing and forthing in terms of leadership challenges, out of which Mark Jefferson Golding was elected as leader of the party and leader of opposition, and has had a significant amount of work to do to get the party back into some fighting shape and to present it as a serious contender for the role of governing the country. As a political commentator, a social commentator specifically, and as a political contender generally, or a political commentator generally, I've been following this thing for a long time. And having lived a long time, I have a fair amount of a fairly large window to operate from when I talk about Jamaican politics, and so it represented a challenge not only for the People's National Party, but one for Jamaica as well, because we have what we call a Westminster style democratic approach to governance. And the 2 political parties represent the clutch of how the government work. And remember, government still requires the participation of the opposition. And having a strong opposition is a very significant part of how you maintain the guardrails to governance. And so the People's National Party has had a hell of work to do, carrying a whole heap of water in basket up a hill to get to the point where they are. And so as the the the, the debates unfolded, it gave the audience, both at home and here in the diaspora, a look at the two sides. Now, the the leadership debate specifically provides an opportunity to see what kind of political lead. We know what Andrew Holness represented. He's been in charge of the Jamaica Labour Party and at the helm for the better part of the more than just a little over 10 years, because he did serve a 12-week period as leader of the party when in the 2010-11 period, when the Dudus affair resulted in the termination, if you will, of Bruce Golding's tenure as a prime minister. So he has been, Holness has had to navigate a fairly treacherous minefield of internal political opposition. And I think he has been successful at that. The same is true for Golding, who found themselves in the hot seat because the PNP now had to deal with the same kind of problems that the Jamaica Labour Party had been grappling with for more than 2 decades, finding leadership in the absence of Eddie Siaga. And so it brings us to where we are. For a lot of Jamaicans, the issue with Golding was one where people don't really know it. You listen to the critics, you listen to the opposition. In the first instance, his opponents on the government side basically spent a lot of time trying to pigeonhole him as an outcast, if you will, right? In fact, there was a disrespectful reference, and I consider it as disrespectful, which undermined the fact, disregarded the fact that this was a man who was born in Jamaica, and it became a sort of an epithet, if you will, attached to him. I have seen where people on social media refer to him as, the son of a slave owner, and that we don't want no slave owning Bakramasa to serve as prime minister in Jamaica. And I consider that as disrespectful, and I'm a big man. I'm not a young boy, right? One of the things that I learned, even if you don't if you don't like the person, one should be looking at them in the context of the role that they play and respect the offices that they hold. But the JLP spent the better part of the last 3 years trying to paint Golding in this light, negative light. And so what we saw in the debate last night, for me, there were some revelations. Now, again, I grew up in Jamaica during the period of the 1970s, so I've seen what the divide can do. I have written prolifically about this thing, and have used my little bully pulpit here time and time again to call on Jamaicans to shed this kind of the kind of references, the divisiveness that has been the way we do politics, and to recognize that at the end of the contest we're still one people, one country, and so this contest is kind of a marker for how far we have come, right? It's not only about the Golding having to prove himself, but it says, for me, how far have we come? Are we able to have discussions on politics without the acrimony? To a large extent, I would say that we are succeeding. We're not there yet, but we are succeeding. But to the debate last night. Now, both candidates came out, and the questions were fielded by a journalistic panel, set up by the organizers. I think it was what's her name, Dale Jackson Miller, and can't remember the name of the young gentleman who sat beside her, who basically fielded the questions. And there were questions from social media that came in, and so initially I had some disappointments because of how the arguments ran. I thought that some of it was a little too personal, if you will, and it clearly both sides, and largely Prime Minister himself started out on the defense. Let me just welcome my good friend and long-standing, dedicated supporter, Opal Morris Powell, who always join our streams. And just invite you, wherever you are, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube or you're on our website, again, welcome to the telecast. All right, so Golding had a responsibility, as did Holness. Golding, let me deal with Holness first. Now, Holness as the incumbent had a job to do, and that is to sell to the viewers the job that the governing Jamaica Labour Party had done, and to sell to them, because remember, when they came into government, they were heralded in under the thing about bringing prosperity to the country, and that was the platform that they came on, and they had 10 years to do this. And so Holness's job was to just also want to welcome my very good friend, my sister by another mother, Hyacinth, Hyatt Darby, who just joined. So his job was to say to the voters out there, here is what we have done, and these are the reasons why we need to continue for another 5 years, because we have laid a foundation. This is where we feel you are better off for doing it, for the job that we have done. And in order for us to continue to do this magnanimous job, we need you to vote us back in for an additional 5 years, which would kind of come back to the point of getting the second time in history that a political party would have been getting a 3-term thing, right? But three terms, 15 years at the week. And so Holness's job was to convince Jamaicans that not only the primary reason why you need to give us back this job is because I am the maximum leader, and I have shepherded this ship SS Jamaica to this point, and you, the voters, have been feeling the benefits of it. Clear. Mark Golding, on the other hand, had what, from a political standpoint, would have been a more difficult task, because again, most people don't know it. I mean, I would consider myself as a political animal of sorts. I have been following this politics for the better part of the last 40 years. I know of Mark Golding, the attorney at law, and I know of Mark Golding, the businessman, banker, capitalist, if you will. I know of Mark Golding as the son of Professor Sir John Golding, who had established the Mona Rehab Center back in the days after the polio myelitis outbreak. A lot of Jamaicans weren't particularly au fait with those antecedents either. But Golding had a job to convince Jamaicans that his mind is sharp, his thinking is he's steady in terms of his focus, his ability, and his trustworthiness. That's his job. And that he has taken the time to familiarize himself, not only as a political candidate, but from a leadership position and the way he has shepherded his team, that he has made the connection, more than made the connection. And so this platform of work that they now intend to do will supersede what other PNP administration has done in the first instance and provide a far better slate of options to the electorate than the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. And so this is the introduction. The problem too that the JLP has and Holness has had specifically is that Holness's credibility and reputation is tarnished. Anomy assessor, those are the facts, right? Holness, as the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party and head of the government, has this issue with his statutory declarations that remain for 3 going now into 4 years that have not been signed by the Integrity Commission. What is even worse is that the Integrity Commission in its current dispensation was established by the Jamaica Labour Party administration in 2017. The people who were appointed to the Integrity Commission were called by the Andrew Holness administration. There was a sort of a merging of the Contractor General and so on, all of these bodies to now become the Integrity Commission. And the purpose of the Integrity Commission is to literally keep our public servants, those who wanted to offer themselves to serve in Jamaica, to ensure that they are people of unquestionable integrity, that in an environment where influence can be bought, right? People peddle influences by pumping money into political organizations or into the coffers of candidates and their campaigns. They pump their private funds into these campaigns, so that at the end of the political exercise, if the candidate wins, they expect to be compensated for their contributions. And so, in other words, people can be bought. That's the reality of the world that we live in. And you need the Integrity Commission to ensure that the people who put themselves up are actually serving the best interests of a majority of Jamaicans. And the reality is, given the gaps clearly that the investigators have found with Holness's declarations, they remain unsigned. And instead of attempting to deal with those in a way that would address the issues, what Holness did is the very same law that he helped to write as the Prime Minister and the leader of the government all the way back in 2017. He has opted to go to the court to overturn the Integrity Commission in order to get them to stop investigating. Those are the facts. Without getting into the details, you can go double check that. And Mark Golding, as his opponent, took the position that this chink in his armor, this gap, this hole in his defenses is worth exploiting. Now, keep this in mind. Debates are not policy formulation exercises. That's not what they are. What a debate does is to serve to say to the onlookers, you, the potential voters, or the respective supporters of either party, either side in the exercise. It says we want to see the stature of the people who are seeking to put themselves at the head of government. It is a show, right? It says how these people would comport themselves, both in terms of their ability to demonstrate leadership, to deal with pressure, if you will, which is what a debate is. It's not. Remember, you can't craft policy and outline policy in a 2-minute response to a question. That is not it, right? So this was the situation, and so Golding began the debate by basically introducing not just himself, but what Holness as the head of the government is about. And him say, your statutory declarations can be signed. Mine has been signed. All of the members of my small group that is opposition are not at issue, having no issue with the Integrity Commission. Those are the facts. And so from that moment, you realize that Holness is in trouble, because he spent the next hour not making a case to the electorate, but in trying to convince people that what has been in the news over the course of the last couple of years with respect to him and his problems with the Integrity Commission is not true, right? And at every opportunity, Golding nailed him with that. I remember as a youngster watching, Mike Tyson rather, as a youngster when he just started boxing. And all of his opponents come to the ring. They come to the ring with a fight plan. This is what they're going to do. Until Mike Tyson land the first dynamite in them kutus and all of the game plan. Well, when Mark Golding landed that blow, Holness fell apart, right? Holness fell apart. And so to a certain extent, a lot of his responses now basically started to become ad hominem, if that is the correct term. In other words, personal attacks, questioning the right of the opposition leader as a Jamaican, questioning his birth as a Jamaican, that whether or not he is a Jamaican. And the party had been doing that for years. In fact, I expressed my own disappointment with the previous Minister of Finance, who took the position to refer to him as Bakra Mark, right? And I thought that given our slave history, it was disrespectful. It was out of order. It was disrespectful. Well, the Prime Minister went down that road last night, and Mark Golding reached into his jacket pocket and took out a copy of his birth certificate in the presence of the television cameras and to the thousands and hundreds of thousands of viewers all about the place who watch on social media, whatever, and say, Mr. Prime Minister, here, this is my birth certificate that says I was born at the University Hospital of the West Indies in July of 1965. Da 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 da. Say, as a matter of fact, I have a copy of the birth certificate for you. Now let me tell you something. Maybe if it was a boxing match, the referee would have stopped the fight, because that blew Holness out of the thing, and so he descended further down the road to suggest that to be a Jamaican, essentially you have to have a Jamaican passport. In other words, that they are having a Jamaican passport and a birth certificate. If you're born in Jamaica, is not enough to say that you're a Jamaican. And whether you want to like it or not, once you go down that road, there's no coming back. It is interesting to know that there are supporters of the JLP who believe that even when you're born in Jamaica, you're not a Jamaican citizen. Which I thank you for that point, Errol Salke, just pulling some of the comments from the people who were online on social media. Darby said, have to pick up another time. Da, da, da. All right, let me back up. Yeah, Opal talks about the yelling and the thing. Now, to the questions that were asked, I thought that what Golding did was, first of all, he maximized the use of the time. You have 2 minutes to answer a question or thereabouts, and in the course of doing a rebuttal, you have, I think it's 45 seconds. And what I saw there was a masterful display of control, because despite the personal attacks that the Prime Minister had now resorted to, Golding maintained his composure. He kept his cool. He focused on the questions that were being asked of him. But every opportunity that he had in putting in his response, what he did, masterfully did that, is to tie the Prime Minister, tie it back to the Prime Minister in terms of his own non-compliance with the requirements of the Integrity Commission. In fact, he made the point that the Integrity Commission, and he reminded the Prime Minister that they set up the Integrity Commission, and that the purpose for which the commission exists, right? And then he went further, because Holness then proceeded to accuse him that he benefited from some sweetheart deals with respect to how he made his money as a businessman in Jamaica. And again, Golding responded not with any rancor or anything, but with just essentially saying, listen, the business we ran, 3 of us were made up the business, Daring, Bunting, and Golding. And this business was listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And what does that mean? It means that every year we have to provide the stock exchange, our shareholders and our clients, with a audited financial account, which tells the status of the company, the status of the directors, etc., etc. In other words, what Golding did last night was to contrast his own capacity, right, to follow the rules. And he says, unfortunately, we can't speak about where you stand, because as of this moment, you are here and your statutory declarations cannot be signed off on. So we can't even discuss it, right? What is clear? In fact, when he gave him the birth certificate, he said, "I'm giving you a copy of my birth certificate. It's a pity you cannot give me a copy of your statutory declarations." And then he went further to say, "We are not having any issue with this, with the Integrity Commission, right? It is you and maybe 9 or so other members of your political party who are before the Integrity Commission for what they refer to as illicit enrichment." From where I was sitting, and we don't take no political side, because listen, if tomorrow morning the PNP form the government and them they carry on with foolishness, I see him way me ever deal with them, right? This is who I am, right? I don't really care about who is the government. What I want is a government that work for the people of Jamaica, not for themselves. And so the issue of salaries and stuff came up, and the prime minister dived back to his comfort zone of talking about the macro position that they have paid down the debt. The debt to GDP ratio is now 65. The opposition leader corrected him that it is 62.4% because of some recent re-evaluation by the respective bodies who provides that. And so that again rattled Mr. Holness, because I started to wonder how much preparation he had done for this debate. Because one of the first things that I would figure, if you properly prepare and dealt with your coaching and things for a debate like this, you must know that the integrity issue is going to come up. And so you have to come with some solid arguments. And he tried. The problem is the issue of the Integrity Commission, and the problem with him and those unsigned declarations is a matter of fact. And so it is fair game to hammer him with it, because what you are doing is you're saying, if the head of the stream is corrupt, it's not difficult to make an argument that the rest of the stream is going to be corrupt. And so essentially what Golding is saying is, do you, the electorate, want to, in the face of all of these issues, the face of a political leader, a leader of a country who is not in compliance, and not only are they not in compliance, but rather than make the effort to become compliant, what you have chosen to do is to take the matter to the courts, to ask the same court to strike down the legislation that he himself created with his political party, so that he can basically fall off the hook. For the first time since I've been following this thing over the last 5 years, it became clear, right? I'm not taking anything. Mr. Holness has done in terms of his leadership of the country, the party has done some good work. There's no arguing that. Granted, a lot of the credit that is being taken, credit that transcends the last 5-10 years. There are structures that are now in place that ensures that you have to follow the management guidelines so you can keep the economy on track. The problem is that instead of doing those things that are necessary to grow the country's economy, it is coming across now that members of the administration have become comfortable, fat cats themselves, where they are doing okay, and they have lost connection with the fact that the average Jamaican who is, who they are asking to vote for them, that they have not answered the question to those voters as to how much better off they have made them in the course of the last 5 or 10 years. Because that is the issue, right? And so, in defense of Mr. Golding, he masterfully carved that position out for people to take a look at it. So if after 5 years, we can say after the first 5 years, you're still getting into his trap, but after 10 years, you are now asking the electorate to give you an additional 5 years to do stuff that you promised you would have done in the first 5 years that you came into government. Right? Not the last 5 years, but the first 5 years. Things you have not done. Right? What is clear that the government has done is that they have enriched themselves, and that there are some people in the country who are doing well. There's no argument about that, Me, I have no argument with that. I mean, I have a problem with people making money, because that's, especially a youngster, you have to do that so you can raise and you can feed your family, and raise them in the Jamaican environment. So let me step back. What is the role of a government? Role of a government beyond the management of the process of allocating resources. This Fitzroy Grant says, I don't agree with Richard. The development, the pathway has been charted already, and Jamaica's future looking pretty. I never said anything different from that. I never said anything different from that. I use different words, but I'm saying the same thing. And I'm going further. I'm saying, based on that road that is now established, it is difficult for anybody to depart from that route. But let me come back. So the role of the government. The role of a government is to provide the kind of structure, governance structure, that redounds to improving the lot of the average Jamaican. Not one group of Jamaicans over another, but to improve the opportunity for Jamaicans of all walks of life to want to live, work, and remain in Jamaica. Right? The government's role is to provide the guardrails through which not only the economic side of the country is developed, but the social side as well, right? So things like school, road, water. I mean, when the Prime Minister announced that some 700,000 people not have regular running water, at 10 years in the government, 10 years. And so you want the opportunity to go fix that. And don't misunderstand me, because it's not a JLP problem. Jamaica's lack of development is a problem that has been with us for the better part of the last 3-4 decades, right? But you would figure that over time, we would have been moving towards addressing these issues, right? And so you have an administration that has been in 10 years. Where are we? The last CXC results that came out show that some 81% of Jamaican secondary school leavers are essentially unable to realize the targeted objectives, past objectives set by the education system. 80%. In fact, it is 80.8. It's 81.8% of Jamaican students. Now, these are youngsters who are between the ages of 17 and 19 years old. And they are leaving school to either A, continue into tertiary studies or into the professions, the work world. But the education thing is saying to you, the results are saying that we're failing. And we have been failing for a long time, right? But having said that, it's a different thing when you're only in government for 2 or 3 years. When you're in a government for 9 years, there's no looking over your shoulder anymore. You have to own the failures. You can't pass it off. And we have this way of when people call them out and say, you never do this. The two sides do it. You look down the road that 30, 40 years ago, and you say, this is what they never do 40 years ago, which is why we're there. So that's bullshit. Absolute crap. People need to recognize that not only are they responsible for the positions that them run down and fight to get into and be disrespectful to each other, right? But you need to be accountable for it as well. And so this is what an election is about. An election is an opportunity for the electors to have a conversation with the respective candidates. Okay, so you want to represent me? What are you proposing to do? How you plan to do it? And when you have taken that job, your job, the next thing is that when the thing come around again, and or periodically you have to do a what you call a reassessment, right? You answer to the electorate. And so the electorate now must look at it and say, where am I 10 years after? How much better off am I than I was 10 years ago when we first gave you the keys for the thing, right? And why then, if you haven't done it in 10 years, what makes you believe that I should accept that you will be able to do it in another 5? These are the questions that electors must ask their candidates. These are the questions that Jamaica must ask both, well, Mr. Holness in this instance, because him ask for an additional 5 years. With respect to the opposition parties basically can't carve out and enunciate no policy because them have no resources to do that, right? What they have a responsibility for is to keep the government honest, right? Their job is to keep them honest, to ensure that they are looking out for the best interests of the people of the country. And if not, call them out so that when the time comes, which is where we are now, right? We, having been shadowing you guys, here's what how differently we would do these things. And so this brings it down to the different manifestos, which I've had the opportunity to look at. And a couple of days ago, I did a program where I looked at 3 areas of the manifestos: education, housing, and this whole salary issue. Now, one of the things that strike me is that and a lot of it's hypocritical, if you will. In 2016, when the JLP announced that $1.5 million tax-free salary thing, a lot of the critics jumped up, those who were not on the JLP side of the ledger, and criticized the JLP. Oh, it cannot work. Well, we are now 10 years in, and it has been working, right? Nobody was insisting on metrics that, oh, you have to deliver a certain level of growth. Jamaican economy has never in the last 20 years grown above 1.5%, right? Never done that. So to Mr. Fitzroy, thing I talk about, because of the established track record, they will build on what's done rather than starting from scratch. This is a what I call you know, and everybody is entitled to their opinions on this thing. The same way how in 2016, when we were in a more precarious position, the government took that road. And by the way, $1.5 million of salaries in 2016 is about the same if you do the conversion based on inflation and cost of living. $3.5 million today is about the equivalent of what $1.5 million was in 2016, right? So the whole point is that the purpose for which people work is to try to make eke out a reasonable existence for themselves, right? Nobody, I don't hear this level of criticism being offered to the JLP's plan to provide tax break to people of reducing the tax rate from 25 to 15%. And I don't hear a lot of the kind of pushback here from the critics about that, because the only persons who benefit from that in any real terms are the people who earning a piss pot load of money, and them don't need it, right? Let me take that back. I'm not saying people don't need money. Everybody want money. But I'm saying to you, a reduction of tax rate from 25 to 15%. A man who earn 30 million, like the Prime Minister and his cabinet, who are earned between 18 and $30 million. That puts them in a tremendous saving position. Now, keep this in mind, that you're talking about putting in a tax approach that benefits a handful of Jamaicans. But you are cutting the throats of the civil servants who are trying to get a salary, a raise of 10, 15, or 20%. And so the government is offering 2.5% to teachers, no increase in the first year of their contract, 2.5% for the other 3 years of the contract. 2.5% in a Jamaica where inflation runs in excess of 4 and 5% per annum. And so the messaging that I believe the JLP has been sending to the Jamaican population, particularly to Jamaicans in the lower economic scale, is that on an account, you know, why, listen, on an account, and on can go and just go and deal with phony, right? The reality is that government, the purpose of our politics and the people who put themselves up there to serve, is to improve the opportunities, the life chances of the people that they serve. And if you can't do that, if you are not doing that, you don't deserve to be considered any more time. Tell me what you think. I say all kind of feedback. Let me take a look at some of these the notes here. Fitzroy, let me start with Opal, who says, let me see, there's no excuse that after 9-10 years a lot of communities are without basic necessity of running water. You better believe that, right? One of the things, I remember I was in Jamaica a couple, what was it, two years ago when there was a lot of road work going where they were building out the Mandela Highway. And so a lot of the water, because a fair amount of the potable water that comes into communities come from Rio Cobre and a lot of water commission infrastructure in and around that area, and they interrupted that, the digging and so on and so forth, and it made life miserable for a lot of Jamaicans. Politicians went in, same at this current administration, and they had these water trucks, and you only deliver water to your constituents. We have to get our politicians to start look at the country in its totality. That even if you win an election, you don't win simply because you had more JLP voters voted for the Jamaica Labour Party, right? When the election is over, you are the government for every Jamaican, right? I'm watching an old tape this morning where Warmington is doing a tour in his constituency down in a Spanish town down there. And this guy, who apparently is a wannabe politician, whether he is an independent or what, but he certainly wasn't from Warmington side. And Warmington, literally, the only thing left to do is for probably somebody fire gun after the man. You can't walk in a my tour. How do we get here? Because that kind of behavior, and he lambasts the guy, right? And the guy is saying, I have a right as a citizen to listen to you and everybody else, right? In other words, if me don't identify you as a laborite, you can't no way listen to nothing what me have to say. How do we deal with that? We have to get away from this divisiveness, because at the end of the day, we don't need 350,000 people who are going to vote for the JLP or the PNP to run the country, or to provide the workforce and the resources to drive the country. We need the entire 2.8 million Jamaicans, right? And so what I saw in that debate last night was something that I had not looked at it like that before, but you couldn't help after a while watching it. That Golding, despite the angst that Mr. Holness was spewing at him, he held and maintained his composure. It was marvelous to watch, right? Marvelous. He never flinched. He never make up his face. He never raised his voice. His tone was pretty much the same throughout the debate. And what he did is that he focused on the job that he came there to do, which was to answer the questions that the people raising, to literally hammer the Prime Minister for the fact that his slip has been showing for such a long time, right? To put him in a corner and paint him as unfit to operate as a leader of the government. I'm just repeating what transpired. Was it successful? According to the experts who were gauging the debate, they said yes, it was successful. And so let me read something that somebody sent me. It says, 3 judges carefully scored both leaders across 7 categories: content, organization, delivery, strategy, impact, adherence to the rules, and creativity. And then it outlined the winners. One judge, it says, after all the scores were tallied, Mark Golding has been declared the winner of the leadership debate. He finished with a commanding 863.5 points, while Andrew Holness earned 774 points, a decisive margin of 89.5 points. And then it gives you a breakdown. Judge 1 scored Holness 274 and Golding 318. Judge 2 scored Holness 224.5 and Golding 251.5. Judge 3 scored Holness 275.5 and Golding 294. Now, scoring consistency across the panel was strong, confirming the result. Now, the highlights, it says content and strategy. Golding had the sharper arguments and game plan. Delivery and impact, Holness stayed competitive, connecting at moments. Creativity of punchlines. Golding shined, delivering the memorable lines that landed with judges and audience alike. Let me just grab that here. He went on. This debate wasn't just about who could talk longer. It was about who could inspire trust, clarity, and leadership under pressure. It says, Mark Golding stood out not only for policy knowledge, but also for his ability to deliver with confidence, structure, and unforgettable punchlines. And of course, we all remember the punchline when he said, after handing a copy of his birth certificate to Mr. Holness, he says, it's a pity you can't even hand me back a copy of one of your statutory declarations. Enough said. So, how does this debate line us up for the elections and our expectations going forward? Did the candidates make that connection? That's a great question. I believe that one of the things that I've seen with some of the feedback on the myriad of social media platforms is that, and one, there are a couple of commentators who have expressed that if you're in office for 9 years, in your 10th year, and you're asking for time to do things which you had promised to do in your first year, why should the electorate give you that time? And I think that that is an excellent argument to make, a strong point. For me, I believe that this election is going to now come down to, it's now up to the voters. Essentially, there's not a whole heap more arguments that can be made. Granted, I believed that, and again, I'm not suggesting that we can do these things during a debate where you can enunciate any hard and fast policy. You only have 2 minutes, and basically 40 seconds of delivery. I believe to that there should be some fact checking. Mr. Holness made some claim that the economy have to grow at a rate of 8% per annum to be able to pay people, or to be able to remove income tax from people who are earning $3.5 million a year. Now, that means that it will never happen. Essentially, what Mr. Holness is saying is, apart from the fact that him and his crew are literally drawing the bag every month, average of them earn over $25 million a year, that people who are in that category earn $3.5 million and under, that they are going to be nailed to that level of income for the rest of their working life, because the government of Jamaica is not, by virtue of the pronunciations that are being made and that the government is hanging on to, right? We can't pay people more money. We made the argument a couple of years ago that with a debt to GDP ratio of 100% and more, that you can't provide the level of wage increases. Well, so you have now created a fair amount of economic space by virtue of you paying down the debt. And you're still saying you can't do that. The reality is that that was never Jamaica's problem. Jamaica's problem is that we have not been able to encourage Jamaicans who have money and want to invest that money in real investments, we have not been able to encourage them to do so. The whole question of per capita GDP income is simply this: the total value of the productive output of the country divided by the population. And the only way you can move that needle is by increasing the amount of investments that come in. And an investment in Jamaica is not a man of putting money in the bank. That's not an investment. We are talking about investment that is designed to drive the productive capacity. What our political masters have succeeded or has failed at doing over the years is to move that needle, right? But in order for that to happen, we need to do some other things. We have to fix the school system. We have to fix it not from the secondary level, but we need to go back to early childhood education. We have to look at primary education. We have to get to a situation where we don't have kids leaving early childhood, coming into primary schools and can't read or write. And then we move them up the ladder into secondary school where the problem still exists. We need more teachers. We need specialist teachers. We need to make sure that we have guidance counselors in the school system to deal with behavioral problems and to provide guidance to young people who have challenges at home, so that when you have settled those issues with the kids and them coming at the classroom, even if 35 of them in the class, the teacher now don't have to spend a third of him or her time dealing with behavioral issues, because the guidance counselors are able to deal with that. So the teacher can provide more teaching time to our youngsters. But in order for that to work, you need more teachers. And in order to get more teachers, you have to encourage people who leave school to join the teaching profession. And in order for that to work, you have to pay them. Because if you not pay them, they will jump on a plane once and finish the teaching course and then gone a foreign, right? And so we no benefit. 46% of Jamaicans live outside of Jamaica. We have to change that. And that is the role that government have to undertake, right? We have to change the way how we manage our people, how we invest in developing our resources, right? We don't need to try. I mean, it's great if we go out a road and we find some oil and we find some gold and all of that. But we have all of that. We have the oil and the gold already. We just need to refine it. We have a population. Jamaica's greatest resource is its people, right? And if we make a concerted investment in developing our people, over time, we will be able to realize the other primal objectives that we set for ourselves. But again, you know, it's a recurring decimal for me, because I believe in these things. I believe in a Jamaica, no less than anybody else. I believe, though, that it is time now that the people who are going to select who will make up the administration make the choice that looks at their own condition, right? It can't be that because someone will live a foreign and we have like a PhD and you have a nice little job somewhere, that you forget, say, you come from a space where you used to walk on the side of your shoes because you can't pay the bus fare, right? And then all of a sudden, because you escape the poverty trap, you know, remember, say, your brother and sister them down a yard are suffer. Because that is the problem. People in Jamaica are suffer, right? That is why the macro numbers that the government are bandy about, that's good for maybe what, 10-15% of the population. I'd love to hear that. But what happened to the other 85%, right? A man who earned, what is it, let's say minimum wage is $20,000 a week, right? That's $80,000 a month, right? Less than $1 million Jamaican a year. That is not even 7,000 US dollars a year. Good, right? And so a man who earn them little money there, I go struggle for pay $600 for a loaf of bread. A man who earn $5 and $10 million, that's not a problem for him, right? That's not a problem for him. The average little youth leave school, find a little girlfriend and want start a family. He want somewhere to live. You can't pay rent and mortgage on $20,000 a week. So our objective must be to advance the people who in other cohort there to a higher level. That's what we have to do. That is the role that politicians take. And so when people have criticized the PNP, oh, we are run, go back into the social program and we are going to undo the gains of it. It don't make no sense with a sit up on 50 years of foreign exchange reserves in the Bank of Jamaica because we take the cash reserves away that we get out of the system and tie it up in a foreign exchange. And people are dead for hungry, right? We're not. We have the National Housing Trust collects some 24 to 30 billion dollars a month from contributors, but we're not building enough house, right? And even if you do build house, you can't pay rent and mortgage out of $20,000 a week, right? The Jamaica Employers Federation, the private sector organization of Jamaica, the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, all of these rich people who run these things want to continue to pay Jamaican people tuppence money. We are still in that post-colonial, just come out of slavery days where we depended on free labor to run the plantations. So what we have done is just barely move down the street a little bit because we have to pay them a little pittance. And everything we put in our bank account, and we go buy a Mercedes, and we buy a Jaguar, we buy a Maserati, and we buy this, and we have a plane and thing, and the people them are suffer. And then you wonder why them not come and work and ask them. We have to build a Jamaica that work for every Jamaican. And that is the challenge that the two political parties are facing. I'm listening to the JLP man them in the other two debates, and they are disconnected from the everyday realities of Jamaicans. Some basic questions that speak to opening the gate a little wider for the little man, and them can't relate to that. And they don't want it. And then a whole heap of other people who in and outside of Jamaica, because them a make a money, them not care about the small man. We have to change that. That's what this election is going to be about, right? And I am encouraging people, you're there in Jamaica, you have a vote, go out and vote. No matter who you vote for, right? This thing of 35% of the voters vote bullshit. Because that is why the politician them can treat you with so much disdain. That is why you can have political leaders who believe that I can enrich myself off of the system outside of the rules that I helped to create. And I don't have to answer to nobody for it, right? That is what is feeding that, right? And the minions who sit down in the parliament behind leaders like those are no better. We really should be aware by now, it should be information that is presented to the public, who these 10 people are that are under investigation by the Integrity Commission. In any other economy, this couldn't fly, but it has been flying in Jamaica, right? And this is what this election is about. We need to change those things, right? People need to now recognize the power of your vote, right? And if they're not deal with where you deal with, vote out them backside. And if the other side you vote them in and them do the same thing, next you get rid of them backside same way, right? We need accountability. That's all the time I have for today. just want to use the opportunity, encourage you guys. Take a look at, visit my website if you're on the website there at yardmedia.com, and check out my book, the my, the Sheila Unbroken, Sheila 2.0 Unbroken. Check that out. That is just recently published, and it's available on Amazon.com. If you visit the website and make a purchase, what I will get you is a signed copy, an autographed copy, and just follow the instructions on the website, yardmedia.com, YAAWD media.com. And while you're there, take some time just to visit the go through the website. There is also Sheila Sheila Part 1, and of course there is the top rankings, which looks at the issues of violence in Jamaica over the years. I am a man who in addition to advocate for the culture and creativity in Jamaica, this is the role that I have chosen to take. So it's not just that me talk about politics, but me write as well. And follow me on Facebook, follow me as well on Instagram and on YouTube at our Yard Media account on YouTube. Until we meet again, we have another session on Monday. We're going to take a look at a little deeper dive into the manifestos, and I want to talk about what one of the big voting cohort for Jamaican politics, people over 60. What is it in both manifestos for people over 60, the most reliable voting cohort for any of these political parties? We're going to take a look at that on Monday. Until then, enjoy your weekend. It has been a pleasure. Thanks. I know you guys have options as to what you can do with your Friday afternoon, and so I'm completely appreciative for the time that you have spent. Have a wonderful weekend, and check us out on Sunday for our Reggae Chronicles piece, where we take a look at Jamaican music and some of the artists who helped to make us popular. Have a wonderful afternoon.